Start by taking a point of personal privilege. So what was neat about Howard's sermon was I didn't hear it until this morning at the 8 a.m. service because Father Nicholas did all the coaching. So I got to be a little bit of a daddy today, which is a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and get started, and I'll say good morning to all of you all. This is our third forum we've had on storms this program year. The first was last October, and in that time we talked about Hurricane Milton, its impact on our church, on our Sunday school atria, on our church mouse, on the maintenance office, on the clergy and staff offices. That forum back in October ended with this question: what about the next 75 years of storms? So what have we done to date? To date, the rectory, which is right next door to the parish hall complex, is at a code height. That was done back in 2004-ish. The parish hall, done in 2021-ish, is at code height. We have options to raise the Sunday school classroom, much like we did with the conference room and libraries. We have a strategic plan for a 2-story office with multi-use space underneath. Maybe that's the church mouse. But then I asked in that forum, what about the church? And we called for a commission to think about what to do with the church, to receive and investigate any and all options for our church. Before I introduce you to the committee, I want to welcome again those of you who are Zooming or streaming. It's been a wonder since COVID about how our parish really has transformed into more of a year-round parish than ever. Those of you who engage in the Bible studies or the prayer groups or even Sunday worship from afar know how we've changed. Later on in the presentation, when the committee comes on board, there'll be time for you who are Zooming to enter in chats if you have any questions or observations. Father Nicholas is watching those in the AV room, and Mother Marcella will bring them out. On another note, we have plenty of time, right? We're not squeezed in between a 9 and 11:15 service, so everybody take a deep breath. They're donuts because youth group always gets donuts, so don't get hangry around lunchtime. Plenty of time. Let me introduce you to the committee. Co-chairs are Mick Moore and Casey Weidmiller. They're going to stand. Connie Fuller is on a trip. Mark Borelli, John Ike, David Feit, Helene McGee. Is Connie here? No, she's on a trip. Helene is on a trip, and then Kim McQueen. This is the committee. Please be seated. Oh, Mike Moore. Yeah, Mike Moore. He's on here. So each of these are wonderful parishioners, and many of you know them. They each have spiritual gifts, and they also have experiences that were brought to bear. They're lawyers, property owners, business owners, accountants, engineers, contractors, and more. But what I'd like to also add is that each one of them has a faith journey, his or her love of God, and experience of our sacred space. They've experienced weddings in the church, funerals in the church, confirmations and baptisms in the church, regular Sunday worship, seasonal and year-round. Several have plans to be buried in the West Churchyard or East Churchyard, and they've also have friends and family buried there. We all share sacred stories and experiences in the parish hall, in the offices, Sunday school classroom, choir room, kitchen, but the church is really special. It's our center. So they spent hours talking maybe Nicholas can advance the screens. They spent hours talking to vendors, attending public forums on storm resilience, talking to you, their fellow parishioners, who shared their experiences in condos, in your houses, in your businesses, in your country clubs. Notes about their ministry have been in the Sunday bulletin since the fall. They were present for coffee hours, by email, and offered a forum in January, a time when most of our parishioners, whether seasonal or not, are in town. Perfect. Look at all this. In that forum in January, we reviewed the church assets, the recent storms and their effects, the status of the committee's work. They reviewed ways to keep water out of the church, flood protection barriers, walls around the church. They looked at construction materials and remediation equipment. They talked about long-term solutions, raise the church, raise the classroom, raise the offices. They ended by asking, what are your ideas and what are your suggestions? And then they continued their ministry, investigating, learning, asking questions, and how all these possibilities could or might work. They produced a report and recommendation to the vestry, what they think we should do. And they sent it to me, and I sent it to you, the whole parish, by email with copies here on Sunday. And now we have a forum to digest, to offer observation, and ask questions about aspects of the report and process, and wonder what's next. I'll turn it over to Mick and Casey and the committee and you in a moment, but I want to share how we enter into and engage in moments like this as faithful Christians. But first, I know that there is anxiety and emotion, and there should be. And so I'm going to say, peace be with you, and you're going to say, and also with you. Peace be with you. Also with you. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So, sacred space is sacred space. We might have one reaction when we talk about office space. Church space, worship space, it's different. So as you read about the recommendation to retire or tear down our existing church and raise it up again, I have no doubt that many, and I hope all of you, had an emotional response. Now, I've been careful not to share my opinion on what we should do, at least I think I have. I want to share with you how I've come to my response, and it is filled with emotion and prayer. And so, what are my emotions? And what are my thoughts? Many of you will remember that I'm no stranger to hurricanes. Growing up in New Orleans, I was taught that you had to keep an axe in your attic in the event floodwaters got high enough so you could get out and not drown. A great aunt of mine survived Camille only by climbing on top of her icebox. I didn't bring it, but in my office there's a cross that's made from my sister's floorboard. Still has mud on it because at Katrina, just months after her wedding, with all of her wonderful wedding stuff in there, the complete house was lost, washed through with nothing but mud. Virginia's parents lost their house. It washed away in Katrina. We think a sailboat hit it. Virginia's grandparents, they went to higher ground. They thought it safe because it survived Hurricane Camille 30 or so years earlier, and we didn't know if they were dead or alive for days. I have pictures of Virginia helping her parents sift through rubble. Hurricanes are dangerous, they are life-threatening, and they devastate communities. They destroy churches. Next slide. Tell me when it goes. There we go. So this is the church that Virginia and I used to go to on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It's where I baptized my nephew, Court. Before Katrina, you can see on that side. After Katrina, you can see that side. What's the big deal? Well, next slide. This is what Hurricane Camille did in 1969, about 35 years in between storms. Next slide. Now, this is what the church looks like. The decision ultimately was taken away from the congregation. They had to go up, and that's what it looks like. Boy, was there some infighting. And I don't know, the rector was a little bit wonky. He wanted to build his own dream, a different church, different parish hall, everything. So, next slide. So into Naples and Trinity-by-the-Cove I come, part of my experience. And it's a truth in church, and perhaps the world, that we all bring our past emotions and experiences, our experiences of storm, of church, of priests and rectors, into our current experience. You're doing that right now. I remember that when we built the parish hall, a parishioner got very mad at me. She had had an experience of a rector who told the congregation he was building a parish hall. It turned out that that new parish hall became the primary worship space. The historic part of the church was pushed to the side. Thankfully, over a cup of coffee, I shared, I love our church. The parish hall isn't going to become our church. And we kind of laughed because I'm Edward and that other rector was a different rector. Now, many of you have sent emails expressing thankfulness that we've been exploring how to respond to storms. 2 or 3 haven't been so happy with me, and they've offered skepticism and veiled accusation. You know, it's no small thing to pour yourself into leading a faith community with love and transparency, only to have those efforts met with doubt. Certainly, I have invited everyone to listen, conversation, and I seek to guide and ensure you that you can reach out to the committee. I've reflected that those unhappy reactions, I think they show past experiences being brought into the present. And acknowledging that we have all of our own experiences, that's important. So I want to say that the parish hall is the parish hall when it comes to worship. Waterfront worship is great, and I love when we're out on the dock. It's been amazing. But for me, the white walls, the rose windows, and the altar are central. Experience of sacredness as I lead this church. So what are my emotional experiences, and they're real, as we've gone through these storms? Next slide, please. Let me set aside Irma, because I evacuated for Irma, and it was mainly a wind event. It knocked the weather vane off, or crooked, I think off. It's the only Sunday, Irma, in the past 10 years that I canceled a Sunday service. But I still streamed from Christ Church in Bay St. Louis. That congregation came alongside us in that time of worry. So this is my experience of Ian. I watched the waters rise with dread. I had regret that if only I had more time and volunteers, I could have saved the pew cushions. When the winds died down, I got in a kayak. Virginia nearly killed me. She was worried I was going to be electrocuted by downed power lines or washed out the channel. One of the things I know from all of the family hurricanes up in Louisiana and Mississippi is that once the storm passes, you have to let all of the nasty, mucky water out. On the left, you see the church. Water had receded enough for me to open the doors, and only about 2 inches of standing water remained. You can see the reflection of the rose window in that nasty water. And then we called the children over, and we began sweeping the water out, squeegeeing the standing water off the pew seats. And I was overwhelmed with grief and loss. Sacred space wrecked. It was Virginia who kept the family moving that night. I wanted to go home and go to bed. Next slide, please. So I realized that I'm really emotional about this because I experienced it. Many of you were not in town. Many of you were busy cleaning up your own homes. But the cleanup began. And a church isn't like a hotel or a restaurant. It's not quite like a home either, though it shares elements of all three. It's sacred. And now that sacred space was wrecked. And what do you do when that happens? You have to move the altar, the very heart of Sunday worship. You're not going to hear great sound because I didn't mean for this to be a recorded event, but someone did. So let's watch. Next slide, please. We moved the altar because our church was devastated. The walls to the floor, destroyed. Underneath the altar dais, which you see there, mold and water was underneath. It had to be knocked down and rebuilt. One person, while we were under construction, wouldn't go in. Didn't want to see the church under construction. It was a time of emotion. And money. How would we pay for it? It all weighed on me. In all of that, though, my one driving motive was to get the congregation back in the church as fast as I could. And we did. So much so that some snowbirds didn't even see the church in construction. They didn't experience the emotion of seeing the church broken. And at that time, after Ian, I figured, Donna was in 1960, and Ian in the 2020s, once in a lifetime. We'll get the church back like it was. We'll get a replacement organ with storm modifications, good to go. Next slide, please. Milton hit at night. And it's much better when a hurricane hits during the day than at night. Night is scary, chaotic, you can't see what's going on. This is the best picture I could get, but this is what Galleon Drive looked like. I went to the next door neighbor because I got a little spooked in the rectory and they had a second floor. So I went to bed with this on my mind. And Virginia and I were up at 5 a.m., still water on the street to wade through, and then kids and volunteers followed later. Next slide, please. You can see Milton, there I am pointing out how high it got on the church, about 20 inches, about maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches inside the church. Sewage backup in the sacristy, right? Devastation even with the smaller storm, and gross. Now, some will say 2 storms in 3 years. It may be 20 years before another one comes. But I thought back in October, we owe it to ourselves and to the generations that come to really think this through. And many of you told me we needed to do the same thing. So with all of these emotions, and with the 16 years of ministry here, with all of the weddings, with all of the funerals, with the people I've had to say goodbye to, with those wonderful people I've got to baptize, my daughter, for one, with the confirmations, my children, Howard preaching today, all that COVID stuff we went through, all of these emotions and experiences are brought into the challenge of storm resilience in the future. And I want it said of all of us in this congregation at this present time that we were thoughtful, that we were prudent when tending to the sacred. So thank you for listening to my story, but thank you even more for realizing that emotion is with us and it's with you, all of your past experiences. But we also live in a world that calls us to be practical, to be good stewards, and to be a generation that builds on those who have gone before, and a generation that blesses those who come after. Next slide, please. Many of you may not realize this of me because you see me giving announcements and having fun quips or in the pulpit, but I'm a very methodical person, and I try to look at problems from as many different angles, listen to as many different people, turn around arguments, pros and cons, and take in as much information as I can. All throughout praying, and then a final sleep on it. So right now, I'm taking in as much information as I can, trying to get as much information as I can, and I'm praying. What am I praying about? Next slide, please. So this is what I'm praying about. This is what I understand the Storm Resilience Committee's long-term recommendation to be. The same church. It's a rendering from our architect. We invested in it so that we could all see what words in a report would lead to. raised as much as possible out of the storm waters, and strengthened against wind. Next slide, please. This is what I'm praying about. It's a view of the west side of the building. We have two memorial gardens, the west and the east churchyard. Understanding the deep emotional and spiritual ties to these sacred spaces and the church, extensive discussions have been held with parishioners who have family members buried there, as well as those who have made plans for their own final resting places. These conversations have provided an opportunity for individuals to share their concerns, hopes, expectations regarding the preservation and protection of these cherished grounds. I've sought guidance from the bishop, engaging in thoughtful discussions about how other churches have navigated the sensitive matter of preserving grave sites when church buildings undergo significant changes, or in some cases are sold. And these conversations have brought valuable insights into best practices for maintaining the integrity of burial sites while adapting to the realities of environmental and structural changes. I've laid to rest many people I love in these sacred spaces. And my plan for Virginia and me is to be on the east side. After all, I've reared my children here. I plan on being here a while longer, and a place where so many people I love and respect are laid to rest too. So if you have any questions about these spaces, come and talk to me. It's been a journey for me to understand what seems to make sacred sense. And as a reminder, I don't make decisions in a bubble. The bishop, people who have parents in these gardens, people who have sons in these gardens, people who have daughters in these gardens, and mothers have been talking to them. So these are my emotions, my thoughts. This is what I'm holding in prayer. And so now I want to return to the Storm Resilience Committee, to their report and process, and then we'll have observations and questions, and then we'll talk about what's next.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Mick Moore. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Storm Resilience Committee. Give me just a second. We're going to transfer over to a different PowerPoint. Let's see if my clicker works. Yay. Okay, good morning. I'm going to stand over here so I can see the screen. I thought what I would start with this morning is just describing the process that we went through as a committee to come up with the report that you all hopefully have seen and been able to read, and then to describe the recommendations that we outlined in the report. And then we'll have the opportunity to take observations and questions about those recommendations. And I'll describe a little bit about what is the process from here going forward, because the report is not at all the end of the road. The Resilience Committee does not make decisions. Our church is led by the vestry. So the vestry will ultimately be going through a process of discernment and making decisions. So I'm going to go through these slides rather quickly. Many of you were here for the listening session and you saw it, and almost all of this is in the report, but I'm just going to go through it quickly. So at the last meeting, we went through a roadmap of what we were doing, and we outlined who the committee members were, who are still here, and we were looking to determine what to do to proactively prevent and mitigate storm damage from hurricane flooding and winds. We actually changed the name of the committee from the Flood Resilience Committee to the Storm Resilience Committee because most of the storms that we've had over the past 60 years have been windstorms. And I think we've learned as a community how to protect against wind far better than how we've learned to protect against water. But we're forced to learn now how to protect against water. So we went over the church assets, and this is all outlined in the report. We have the church, which was built in 1953. We have the parish hall, which, as Edward described, has been raised, the office wing, the classroom wing, the rectory, which was moved and raised. We have the parsonage, which is the house that Nicholas and his family live in that's located in Autumn Woods. And we talked about historical storm impacts, many of which Edward went over, so I'll just go through this very quickly. Some of these pictures, this is from Hurricane Donna. So you can see it's not a new problem, but it's one we all forgot about for 60 years. We actually didn't forget about it, we just didn't have to experience it. Hurricane Irma was primarily a windstorm, but a damaging one. And then, of course, Hurricane Ian. And you've already seen some of these pictures. Hurricane Helene, which didn't even come really anywhere close to us, but brought water into Naples. That's Vanderbilt Beach, which I know well. Hurricane Milton, of course, brought water that was not quite as bad as Ian, but as Edward described, it caused damage. And again, some of these pictures you can see. So this is the summary we provided at the last listening session. The church, which is below FEMA grade, was flooded twice in the last 2 years, as well as the office wings and classroom wings, which are located below FEMA grade. The parish hall, which had been raised to above FEMA in 2020, experienced no flooding. The rectory, which had been moved and raised in 2004 above FEMA, experienced no flooding. And the parsonage, which is located in Autumn Woods and built above FEMA, experienced no flooding. So our approach was sort of three-pronged, looking in the short term at the protection, how to protect and prepare to keep water out if possible. Second, how could we improve mitigation and remediation so that if water got in, we could get it out and get back in these buildings faster? And then third, what building alteration could be done to prevent damage and downtime? And again, as Edward mentioned, what can we do to protect the church, not only in the short term, not only in the midterm, but in the long term? I mean, the church looks at long-term solutions. So the current status, we went over the remediation that had been done, which was done very well and quickly after Milton. And then we started looking at short-term solution ideas. And these were some of the things we looked at for short-term solutions to keep water out. We looked at aquafence. In fact, we spoke with the aquafence people. This is described in the report, but this is the system that was used to surround the Tampa General Hospital in Milton to keep the water out. We spoke with Flood Risk America. Many condominiums in our community have installed flood panels on the openings to keep water out. And they had a number of different systems, plank systems, panel systems, all sorts of different things. We met with them. We met with Tiger Dam and looked at the water barriers and the tarps that can be put around openings. And we even looked at other systems. Floodproofing.com is a distributor for these systems, and they kind of are a go-to. They sort of, even though this is an emerging market, there are more and more people coming into the market all the time. They knew of many different types of systems, and we consulted with them about what might be appropriate. We looked at possibly doing a wall around the church, which had been suggested by a few parishioners in some of the emails that we had received as a committee. So we looked into that, whether it was possible, the cost, other considerations relating to a wall. Then we looked at mitigation and remediation. What construction materials could we use to make the church more flood-proof if water got in? We looked at Endura Flood waterproof drywall. We actually installed it in Chris's maintenance office, and we decided we didn't really like it, which is described in the report. We use starboard cabinets and wood-like trim in the classrooms so that if those are flooded again, we won't have to rip out the cabinets. They're waterproof. They'll be fine. The trim is waterproof. It'll be fine. So and we put an epoxy flooring in the classrooms No more tearing out carpet, no more tearing out tile. And then we looked at remediation equipment. Should we buy some of that? The long-term solution ideas, we looked at raising the church, and I'll speak for in a moment about that. We consulted with the architects. Mick Ward, who's been our architect for years, who did the parish hall, who have done multiple renovations. And most of you probably know that Will and Jan Ward, their in-laws, it's actually Jan's father was Clyde McBride, Clyde and Lori McBride. So they have a long-standing interest and connection to the church. But we also consulted with Hart Howerton. Hart Howerton is the architect that is redoing the Port Royal Club, which will be raised up. They're also doing the Four Seasons Hotel, and they're also doing the new hotel on 3rd Street. And so we looked and consulted with them about what we might do building-wise and about raising the church. And then we consulted with Don Garrett, who has been our contractor here for many, many years. They've been in Naples for a long time. And Suffolk Construction, which is the construction company that's doing a lot of the projects I just mentioned. Very sophisticated, and they're doing the Port Royal Club, they're doing the Four Seasons, they're doing some of those projects. We looked at raising the classrooms, raising the offices. So where did we fall on this? And you can see some of why we fell there when we get to the report, and if we have observations or questions, we're prepared to answer those. But I'll tell you briefly where we fell. Flood protection barriers. We decided no to Aquafence, no to Flood Risk America, no to Tiger Dam, but yes to other systems for short term. And the short-term system that we decided on was one that came as a suggestion to us rather late in the game. It's called Zero Flood, and it's, Edward has one right there. This is an inflatable panel that inflates in a doorway, and it seals both below and above. And it's, if any of you are familiar with inflatable paddle boards you see at Costco or people using, it's kind of a hard, there's a hard surface inflatable. That's it. One nice thing about this is they're very easy to deploy, because one of the things we learned and discussed as part of this process is deployment is a real issue. I mean, a lot of these systems, like an Aquafence, for example, I mean, depending on what you read, the cost just to install it around the Tampa hospital took, hundreds of man hours and many thousands of dollars just to install the system. Some of these systems we have to install and take down 2, 3, 4 times a summer, depending on how many storms you have. So deployment and the logistics of where are you going to store this, how are you going to put it up, how are you going to take it down is a major concern, because it's it's something that when you think about it, how it actually works, you have to take that all into account. We discussed doing a wall around the church, and for the reasons that we've mentioned in the report, we decided that that was simply not the most advisable way to proceed. Although we thought, for example, Aquafence could possibly work. We don't know for sure, but we thought it could work. A wall could work. But again, our task was to look at the best possible solution. So mitigation materials. EnduraFlood waterproof drywall. We tried it in Chris's office. We haven't had a chance, thankfully, to check on the waterproofness, but we didn't like the way it looked, and we didn't like the installation process. We preferred the starboard cabinets and wood-like trim, which we installed in the classrooms. So we did do that. We did the epoxy flooring, and we did use some other systems in there. Remediation equipment, we haven't made a decision on that yet. That would be whether we want to buy our own drying fans, our own dehumidifiers, so if we have water intrusion, we can deal with it ourselves quickly without waiting for someone else to arrive. And one of those things is a generator. And so we're looking at short term whether we should try to install some type of generator hookup to at least be able to generate our own power if we need it. And that's still something that's on the table. So, long-term solutions, raising the existing church. After consulting with the architects and with the contractors, we determined that we did not think that was the best idea. Raising a church that's as old as Trinity's church and it was constructed the way that Trinity's church was constructed would be very, very difficult with lots and lots of uncertainties. And at the end of the day, you end up with a 70-year-old church that's been raised and you're waiting to see if there's cracking and things happening. So it would be difficult, and we did not think it was the best solution. Replicating the church above FEMA level, that is where we came down as the best long-term solution. When you think about it, if you can get above where the flooding is happening, that is the best way to prevent all of the disruption, all of the uncertainty, all of the costs that are associated with the types of things that Edward mentioned. And our track record on that has been a good one. This building was raised, and it, fortunately, after the damage to the church, we were able to move over here to the raised building and continue on with church services while we repaired that one. Are there any guarantees? No. Does anybody have a crystal ball? No. If you have one that works, I would like to talk to you. Everyone all over town who lives near the coast is asking these same questions if they're intelligent, and most people are. I've heard from many of you, the committee has heard from many of you, of people who live in condominiums on the coast who are all entertaining the same discussions. Everybody is trying something different, hoping that it's going to work. I tried flood panels on our property on the beach. Did they work this summer? Sort of. I talked to the flood panel company and they said, you know, it's perfectly acceptable with a multi-foot storm surge to have an inch or two in there. They consider that a success. Well, I guess compared to multiple feet, it is a success, but it doesn't eliminate the types of disruption that we're talking about with having to remove the altar. So now this is an emerging area, and my hope is that one day we will be with water as we are as a community with wind. I feel like most buildings in our community are constructed to withstand hurricane force winds. We have impact glass windows. We have shutters. Almost everybody has a way of dealing with wind. And is it perfect? No, but it's really good. And so, but we're not there with water yet. So we feel from a long-term perspective, the best thing to do is to get up above that FEMA level. Now, why replicate the church above it instead of raising the church? Well, raising has all of the issues that I just alluded to, but replicating has some other advantages. Raising the church does not do anything for wind protection. And the building is not really as strong as it should be from a wind perspective because it's an older building. In addition, there are no fire and security protections in the building. That could all be added as part of the replication process. So are there other advantages of replicating the church? Yes. You can make a building that not only hopefully will withstand floods, but it will withstand almost everything that we know is a threat to the church, and it hopefully would be there a long time. So we recited many more reasons and discussion relating to replicating the church in the report, and I urge you to read it. And if anybody has questions about those, in a few minutes here, we'll take some of those questions and observations. But that's a summary of why we came to that conclusion. Raising the classrooms and raising the offices, we determined that not at this time. We would protect them with the flood panels that we talked about, those inflatable ones. We've made the classrooms a little more impervious if we have to do mitigation or remediation. And in the future, we may look at raising those. That would not require dismantling the whole structure. It could be done by simply raising the roof, essentially. You'd pour the floor up another couple feet, and you would take the roof off and raise the roof. The mouse has some problems, but the classrooms and the offices could be done like that. Again, here is a picture of what a replicated church would look like raised above FEMA grade. Really, the only thing that most people notice here is you notice there are stairs here, and what you can't see is there are some circular kind of ramps that go up. So anybody who needs to use a ramp or a walkway, there is a way to get up. But otherwise, it looks like the same church that we all know and love, exactly like it, which would be the plan. The plan would be to make it the same church. And then here you can see the side view. Again, you see a few steps up, a landing, and then there would be a few steps up more. Here you can see some of those pathways that I just alluded to regarding those who have difficulty with stairs. We still have a lot of questions which we outlined in the report. I mean, none of us on the committee have the crystal ball, and we're working through this just trying to go as methodically, as comprehensively as we can with using the best information we have, but there's a lot of questions. So questions are some of the ones that Edward had mentioned. You know, how do we handle, if we decide to replicate, if the vestry decides replication at a higher level is the best way to go, how do we do that from a practical perspective? How do we deal with the churchyards? How do we deal with the structure, with taking it apart and then rebuilding it, putting it back together? Should we modestly enlarge the restroom and the sacristy without fundamentally changing the design of the church? How do we best ensure the smooth transitions, ramps, steps, sidewalks, to make sure that it's accessible? And then we have regulatory questions. Will the city approve the new higher elevation? Our preliminary response is yes, we think they would. But it's still something that has to be tracked down and finalized. Is there a height limitation on the steeple? Can it be exactly the same, or does it have to be a few feet shorter? Can the west outbuilding, which partially encroaches on the side setback, be replicated? We don't think any of these are going to be tremendous problems, but they're issues that have to be run down. And then logistical questions. You know, if construction takes 18 months, what are we going to do during that time period? How are we going to create a worship experience in here that is going to be one that we can all enjoy, that we can all be proud of? How can the organ installation be integrated into the new construction? Because we do have a new organ coming because it was damaged severely, really destroyed in Hurricane Ian. And then costs. What's the total cost? What are the anticipated recurring costs? How do we finance it? We addressed all those briefly to see if we thought any of them were so severe problems that we thought we shouldn't even discuss this option. But our conclusion was that while there are some remaining questions, we thought that we should go the next step. And if that is the best solution, we thought it was a viable solution. We do not think it's an impossible program in any sense of the word. If we did, we wouldn't have put it in as a recommendation. So what are the next steps in the process? This is the first one. We're digesting feedback from all of you on the report and on the suggestions and recommendations we've made. And some of the feedback is relating to questions that we still have, that we've honestly said that we've had. And we have this email, resilience@Trinity-by-the-Cove.com. So after you leave here today, and for anybody who is streaming or on Zoom, if you have questions that come up or observations or suggestions and you want to send them to us, please send them to us at that email address. So the next thing that happens is the vestry is going to consider the report, going to consider the recommendations, going to consider feedback from everyone, and is going to consider all the other factors that vestries consider when they make decisions, especially big decisions for our church. And they're going to do that through a process of discernment and prayer and talking with each other and considering all those things. And then with Edward, they'll make a decision on the best way to proceed. And we expect that to unfold over the next month or two. Edward probably has a better sense of timing, because this issue of hurricanes coming is not one that is going to work on our timetable necessarily. So we are trying to, we should be able to get those panels, if we elect to do that, by this summer, to have those ready. But this issue is one that is, it's going to be one that comes up. I mean, I suspect in about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe less than that, the news is going to be awash with discussions of the hurricane season, which is the early projections are for it to be very active with strong hurricanes. So again, nobody knows whether these predictions and forecasts are right, but we believe we're acting prudently, responsibly, and we're acting a bit boldly, to be honest. It would have been easy for this committee to say, let's just put the flood panels in, we're good. No, we are thinking boldly about the next 25, 50, 100 years. And what are those people going to say? What are my children going to say about what we did or did not do? So anyway, that was kind of our thoughts on this. So Casey has a microphone now, and so now we're going to open up the floor to anybody who has any observations or questions, and all of the committee members, I'll kind of act as the primary contact, then I'm probably going to hand it off to people, and they can chime in as we think best.
Here you go.
The report talks about hoping to begin work or construction in 2026. Can you talk a little bit about how that time frame, or what all has to happen within that time frame? And then in addition, for whoever's going to cost out this project, in this time right now, when we don't know how much anything's going to cost 2 months from now, is that going to be a wide range of costs? How are you going to determine what anything is going to cost with tariffs?
Well, I'll respond to that briefly, and then I'm going to hand the microphone over to John Ike to respond more specifically. But I think the first task, if the vestry decides to proceed, and part of it is going to be to get the costs. I think, tariffs, everyone is not sure what's going to happen with tariffs. I've talked to a number of manufacturers. There's a certain supply that they already have put aside, and they're not raising prices yet. They're waiting to see if the tariffs get reduced or eliminated. But I think everybody is starting to get an idea as to what things will cost if the tariff situation does not change. So I'm going to hand it over to John Ike to let him comment more on the timing and the costs.
Thank you. I guess the first thought that comes to mind is that closer? We learned quite a few lessons on the parish hall. The cost on that originally was lower than the ultimate cost, but as we went through the design development of the parish hall and ultimately signed an agreement with a contractor, the total cost came in very close to what the bid cost was once we signed that contract. So we had very few change orders. The only change orders we had were ones that we initiated, maybe to improve the quality of the windows or soundproofing or some other thing. So we learned lessons there. We also operated with an experienced construction and architect team. And I assure you, if we do go forward with this, that will be the case this time as well. These are people with decades of experience in Naples, working with the architect especially, working with the city, which is often the big holdup. So we'll be able to make realistic estimates. As Mick said, no guarantees, but included in any cost that we put forward will be a contingency. And in the beginning, before they break ground, that contingency will be 20% or something like that. And as we go through the project, as those variables that can hurt us get knocked down, then that contingency gets dropped. So in summary, we learned some lessons with the parish hall. We've got a really seasoned and experienced team, and we'll take the time to make sure that cost and schedule are managed as well as possible.
John and I were talking earlier, and the next step is to go through more of the design. Because the way it works with these projects is you have to design the project and then take it to the contractor and they can give you a price on it. And so we think we'd move forward with more of the, you can see already we have a conceptual design. And based on that, we had just some preliminary gut pricing from contractors. But we would expand the design more. And then there would be a period, probably in the fall, where it would be a go, no-go type decision based on the pricing we were getting. Like, are we going to do this or are we not going to do it? And so, does that answer your question a little bit on the timing? We would be looking at finishing the design, getting some better cost numbers by the fall to be able to make a decision, we're going to go or not go, because that decision hasn't been totally made yet. And you know, I think there was a number in the report of just kind of a square foot number, but then there's site work and things like that. But you know, we don't, even though the number may seem high, preliminary discussions, we think that this is something that we can do, unless the tariffs go really crazy. But based even on the current situation, we think it's something that we can do.
I think I can stand and just...
Okay. Oh, it's for Zoom.
Online.
Yeah, they
Online.
can't hear online without the microphone.
All right. Thank you very much, Mick.
Sure.
Can we talk about finances and how we're going to raise the money? Father Edward indicated in his email that he's had preliminary conversations with some people, so could we get an update on that? And because if you have the money, that's usually the most difficult decision. I know these other things are important too, but if you don't have the money, you can't do it.
Sure, I'll comment briefly and then I'm going to hand it over to Edward. So we would not, Edward has had preliminary discussions with some members of the church who've been donors in the past. And I'm not going to speak for Edward and I'm not going to speak for those donors, but they've been encouraging us to pursue all options, including this option, knowing what the approximate costs could be. So will you ever know what a donation is until the donation check comes in your hand and goes into the bank? No. However, our early conversations have been encouraging, and even with the projected level of cost, those donors have encouraged us to, if this is the best option for the church, you have our support and you should move forward to the next stage of the process so we can explore it together. So that has been something that's been very encouraging for us. Obviously, as this moves on to the vestry then will be entertaining at a deeper level than our storm resilience committee, exactly how is this going to be financed and do we have the funds to proceed with this project. But the preliminary discussions have been encouraging. So, Edward.
Two points. One is I'm not a development officer. I graduated from law school and I went to seminary, and my favorite thing to do is to celebrate the Eucharist and visit. I don't like visiting when you all are sick, but I like offering pastoral care and I like praying. I do the admin work because I'm a rector and that's what you're supposed to do. I'm not half bad. The discussions that I've had with donors who have made significant contributions in the past is, this is what the recommendation looked like it's going to be. What do you think? And so far, those have been positive. But I don't have a magic ball into people's pocketbooks. What I do know, and this is the second point, which is this isn't just a call to make yourselves comfortable, to make ourselves comfortable in this year, 3 years, 5 years. This is a call for a long-term solution for the church. It's a call to give to our next generation of Trinitarians and to make a place that isn't wrecked by storms for them. And that's a call, it's a ministry, and it's something that major donors won't do alone. Our church will have to gather as a parish family and make it happen. One of my favorite donations that I have ever solicited at this church was a $100 bill from a widow who had no business giving it. But she loved this parish hall project, and so she gave. And so I'll take $1, I'll take $10, I'll take $1 million. It'll be the whole church that gathers to help. I mean, that's hard, I know. I've picked your pocket a couple of times. But you know, the storms aren't my fault. The parish hall, that was my fault. I planned that and I wanted that, paid off. But the organ and the storm resilience, that's just the circumstance that we bear together. Good?
I think with respect to cost, we're talking about what's the cost of doing it. We also need to consider what is the cost of not doing it. You know, you put a new organ in here and then it gets destroyed. Now, where are you? So it's a two-way street.
Thank you, and let me just add something that's kind of hanging over all of that as well, and many of you who have experience with storm-damaged properties on the coast or may know people who do, there is the FEMA 50% rule that hangs out there, which is if the church is damaged and it costs more than 50% of the value of that church, we won't be able to rebuild it as is. We would be forced to raise it above FEMA anyway. So what is that number? It's based on, I think, the appraisal we had, which is around $4 million. If the church received more than $2 million worth of damages over there, we wouldn't have a choice. We would have to raise it up in order to have the church. So yes, I appreciate your observation. There are a number of costs and factors. And let me just add one thing, and Edward alluded to this, but he did not say it specifically, so I will say it specifically. The psychological cost of dealing with cleanup and repair and damage after the storm, there is no financial cost to that, but it is a high cost. And it is not only a cost to the people doing the work, but parishioners who have had their homes destroyed, their condos damaged, who want to take advantage of what Trinity has to offer at one of the worst times in their lives, and to not be able to come to the church and worship in that church, there is some cost associated with that. So that's just something that anybody who's experienced traumatic storm damage knows the psychological cost.
I wanted to say one more thing about the organ. So when Ian hit, this is all the Louisiana, Mississippi experience coming to bear, which is let's protect this organ, let's not have this happen again. So let's put a lift on the organ console, that's where you see Trip on every Sunday. Let's make sure to have an amazing casing on the organ so it can't suffer wind damage. Those were good ideas, and that's part of the plan. But after Milton, I went back to the organ company. I said, okay, these are our plans, and they knew about them. I said, what happens if I evacuate and we can't get the water out of the church and it sits there for a couple of days? What's the effect? Well, all the inner workings get zapped, and you have another wrecked organ. And you know, the humidity piece, the other one, and I had a picture of it, is when we dry out that church with all those machines, it's another layer of destruction because you begin to see the paint peel and all the finishes peel, and then you think about how is that affecting the organ in there. So yes, we've made some great changes to the new organ, but is that completely storm-proof? No.
So we have a few online questions, and I'm going to read, we have 3 of them. I'm going to read the first one and then call on Edward and John to answer this. So the question was, we are talking about a church community. Why has nothing been said about the disruption of religious life for the 18 months of projected construction disruption? And even that time estimate is extremely optimistic. So, John, can you talk to the time of construction on what you think for the church? And then Edward, can you talk to how the church would handle any disruption from construction on the church?
So we have a very preliminary estimate of, I think it's 14 months construction, roughly 14 months. We said the earliest we could start would be August of 2026, and we would be complete around November of the following year, 2027. So that roughly 14 months or so. And I think it can be done. And again, I hearken back to this structure. This, by the way, is a far more complicated design and construction project than what we're contemplating today. As you know, we had to cut the center out of this big structure and then support the elements that remained, and then construct this center raise, and then construct this center part. It's very intricate. I don't want to minimize the challenge of the church, but it doesn't really approach the complexity of the construction of this structure. Now, our plan was for this structure to begin work on the Monday after Easter. We started work on the Tuesday after Easter, and our goal was to complete it before Christmas. And Father Edward will be able to verify that Christmas Eve, he was able to perform a service here. So in about 8 months, we built a very complicated project. And again, going back to what I said earlier, we're not going to put this out on the street. Again, assuming we go forward, we're not going to put this out on the street for every Tom, Dick, and Harry construction company to bid on and then get the low price and go forward. That's not how you do it in Naples. We will be getting the best the best talent, design and construction that this city can offer, and we know who those people are, and we've already begun preliminary discussions, introducing them to the project and trying to get their input. So again, I'm pretty confident about the schedule. The only kinds of things that could delay it would be permitting, but again, we have very experienced people who know the ropes and have demonstrated their capability of delivering projects on time, on budget in the past.
Worship and gathering for the Eucharist and even song, of course, that's essential to what we do. We love God. We love God with all our heart, soul, strength, mind. We won't have the church for 14 months. We have this space. We have other space, and we'll make use of it. And we've done that. We've done that during COVID. We've done that during Hurricane, I'm forgetting, Milton and Ian. So we have offered worship in the beauty of holiness. You all have very gifted priests, very good liturgists, and it will be beautiful. Will it be the church? No, but that's what this whole discussion is about. How do we make sure that our church worship is not disrupted by future storms? Now, you also have very gifted staff and a not-so-bad response team in the Gleasons during hurricanes. We've gotten you all back into the church before Thanksgiving, I think, in both Milton and Ian. I think it's St. John's took 18 months to get back after their hurricane. Now, are the Gleasons and is all the clergy and staff going to do everything we can after every storm? Yes. But is that sustainable? No. And so Chris and I were talking about how much strain it puts on us, right? We're the first two there every day. So, I mean, that's the discussion. Will there be disruption? Will you be, not in the church you love? Absolutely. Will you have the altar we love here? The biggest thing, and I've gotten an email from two people who at first they read the report and they said, I don't like this at all. And I said, I don't like it either. And then they said, but could you do something about the seating? I really don't like the chairs that we're in right now. Can we have cushions or can we have the pews? So those are all ways that we can work together, overcome, and make this a prayerful room. It's not a bad view. Those of you who do Rite 3 in this space, it's a holy service. Our organ that you all like right now, Tripp fondly calls it the toaster. We can move that over, and so you can have good organ music here. I think we can even adjust the sound on that one. So I would say trust that this faith community gathers in prayerful ways, even if it isn't in our church building, but in other places around campus.
Okay. We have we'll take another live one and then an online question.
Well, I just wanted to say something, and I really want to thank the committee. You've performed an excellent decision or whatever, but thank you very much. As Father Edward knows, I'm very much a preservationist. I'm from Savannah and Charleston, and my little house in Port Royal is the same architect as the church. It's Howard Major. And I hate to see, I was very much in favor of raising the church and keeping the same architect, Howard Major. So I hope, I always felt with my own house, my walls are so strong. They're like a Fort Knox. But they're very, very strong walls, and I'm sure the church's walls are the same as Howard Major built it. But I'm very sorry we can't raise it, and I hope that, and I do have a very good friend, as I said to Father Edward in New York. They've been raising houses in the Northeast since the mid-1800s. And my house was raised by them in New York, and they have an expertise that's just phenomenal. I would love for you all to speak to them if you'd like to, but I'm very sorry again that we can't raise it, because when you think about raising the church, you have the strong structure, you have a roof, and in my book, I would think that would be less expensive than tearing it down and starting all over again. But anyway, I'll just miss not having the same architect. But
Well,
so those are my words. Thank you so very much for the committee, though. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that comment, and I do understand. And we did get one suggestion recently from Penny Taylor about a company in town that is raising some structures. So we are going to be investigating that, just again as another triple check on whether or not that is a viable option. So John Ike is going to be looking into that to see if this other company is more, if it changes anything with our recommendations.
The east and west courtyards?
Yes.
Are they to be raised, and if so, how?
Edward, that's your department there.
Sure, and it can be a brief conversation here, but I encourage you come and talk to me, because I have about a 45-minute conversation about how we arrived at the current plan, and it's the current plan. As John mentioned, the planning still continues, right? What will the city let us do? How will this all unfold? And there is a whole story, so come and hear it. But right now the plan is to protect the current churchyards by building retaining walls around them, and then consecrating earth and putting 2 feet of consecrated earth on top. That's the plan. Some of the maybe 2 or 3 of the pieces, and again, come in and talk to me, because it's been a saga, not a saga, a journey. When you see people go and see their loved ones in that area, normally there's like an interconnectedness. And I've been watching a lot. People like to walk out of that west transept door and then walk along the sideway, go in, and then come out. They like to, everybody does it differently. And when people are here like a Saturday morning, you see them going in and using that space. If you kept them at the existing level, 2 things. You would disconnect them from the church, because then they would be a sunken garden. So you'd have to change the entrances. So you wouldn't be coming in and looking at the cross. You'd be coming in and sort of turning to the side. The other thing, and this is where my initial view was don't do anything to them. Just leave them and then, do the sunken garden thing. Then someone who has a mom and dad buried there said, when I've seen the storms come, it's been very hurtful, because one of the biggest fears people have is drowning. And my family members are underneath this murky water. And the water, guys, it's not like a spring clean water washing through and cleaning everything up, right? There was a portalet stuck in the trees over there. There's a sewage outlet right over there. So when my kids in Virginia and I walk in and we squeegee out through the floodwaters, guess what? They all get alcohol on their legs because they've been walking through sewage water. So that's the response. But come in and talk to me, because it's sacred ground. The church is too. How do we tend to that in a loving way, and in a way that will work for the next generation, right? I hope that answers.
So I want to read another question from online. Let's see, make sure I can read the handwriting here. I'll start with this one. Why zero flood versus dam easy? John, you want to answer that one? Versus dam easy. I think they meant like a tiger dam, but I think dam easy is a similar type of thing.
Kim may be able to address this better than me, but as Kim mentioned, a parishioner suggested we look into this, and we dutifully contacted the rep and made an appointment, and he came down. We didn't know what to expect. I think basically we were skeptical, as you have to be with all of these devices. People are trying to make money, which is a good thing, but we insist that it be as effective as possible for the church. Anyway, this product is you can come up and feel it afterwards, but it's got the consistency of a football or a basketball. It's really tough. And there's two bladders, a lower and an upper, and then there's these rubber shoes on the sides. I'm sorry? On the bottom. On the bottom as well. And inside, there are probably 100 strings that go from front to back that keep it together like this. So these are custom measured and will fit snugly into a doorway, into an alcove. Usually that's on the outside of the door, but sometimes it's on the inside, or a window. And then once it's snugly in there, this gets pumped up to about 10 or 15 pounds per square inch. And then you could hook it to a pickup truck and not remove it. It is snugly in that door. And if it happens to be any cracks around the front, those are sealed so that you don't get anything going underneath. This really impressed us, and we looked into it deeper. Canadian National Research Corporation performed full-scale tests, which we read the reports, read the summaries, and we're convinced that it's going to be a great solution for us. I'm not familiar with Dam Easy, but that may be a generic type of like the Tiger Dam.
So Dam Easy is actually, it fits inside the doorways. Part of the issue with that product is our doorways are not conducive to that particular product. This one also, with it being measured the way it was measured, it will fit and cover every crevice within the doorway. So Dam Easy, they couldn't guarantee that it would fit that snugly, so there were still options for water to come in. So this does fit snugly. I will tell you that this company, he's been all over Naples. He's been contracted with many businesses on Fifth Avenue. Collier County Sheriff actually called him to come out and do a bid out at the airport to protect their hangar where their helicopters are. So he's getting a lot of good reviews. He was actually installed this in a home in Tampa, and within a very large subdivision in Tampa, that home was the only one that had these. And it is the only home within that large subdivision that did not have to have total reconstruction done on the home. That was the only one, so.
So this is another question online. It's a follow-up really on that, which is that, is there a concern about those zero flood panels not being tall enough? Can they be stacked, or at least can the front door and side doors of the church be built higher?
That is a limitation of the zero flood barriers. We mentioned that in the report. The effective height of these is 31.5 inches. Generally, that puts it at or slightly above or slightly below the flood elevation, the 8-foot flood elevation here, the FEMA flood elevation. So yes, we would prefer if that was a foot or two higher. I think they do make full-size units that fit into doorways, but right now we're not really considering those. So that is a slight limitation on that product, yes.
Okay, does anyone else, we've got another two over here.
I'm going to just, first of all, thank the committee for all their hard work and the staff for all the awesome job. And I'm just going to throw a number out here just for a formula to find out what the answer might be. If, let's say, the process took $5 million and the fundraising only got to $4 million, would a bank loan to secure the balance be on the table to finish that off, or would the plan be shelved if the fundraising is not adequate for the project?
So first, let me say, we're just on the Storm Resilience Committee. That's going to be a vestry decision, right? Which is the honest truth. It's going to be a vestry decision. Now, I will say, and I'll hand it over to Edward in a moment, but in the past, Trinity has at times financed things, sometimes through, I don't know if we've used a bank before, but we have financed things with sometimes parishioners even helping with financing things. But you know, anytime a church considers taking out debt, that raises a host of policy concerns that just the vestry would have to meet those concerns. So with that being said, Edward, maybe you probably know more of the history on the debt side as well.
Sure. So on debt, first of all, the diocese does get involved usually. If you encumber any sort of piece of property, you have to go through a process with financing something. I am typically against debt for churches. I don't really believe in it. I think that we should, raise and do. Because this is a 100-year project, though, if we got close and we had to take out some debt, I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't lead the vestry and set the tone. I set the tone a lot of times. I wouldn't set the tone saying no way. At the same time, I would be looking very closely and wondering, is the whole community of faith behind this, right? So one of the reasons why now, in this moment, is because we're not under duress from a storm. There might be financial winds out there that we're all concerned about, but we're not fundraising right after the entire Neapolitan community has been flooded and the capacity to give is way down, right? I mean, I know that we're watching the stock market and tariffs, but by and large, it's not a terrible environment out there, and it's not nearly as bad as I think it would be if we waited until the next devastating storm. So that's the sort of answer, but we kind of need to see, how the bids come in, how that pricing works itself out, and so that's the answer.
I think back there first, and then Jay will come to you.
John, could you say a few words on this particular product over here about the validation of it? Because there's all kinds of different circumstances can happen. A few words about how did that product get, or how are you going to determine the proper level of technical validation?
Okay, it's a new product, and so there's not a long list of references. And in fact, what we found Kim and I discovered that a lot of these companies don't want to really give out references because they don't want 1,000 prospective customers calling, Charles Jones or, et cetera. It becomes kind of a pain. So we can't look at a long list of references. What we did look at, though, in detail was about a 70-page report done by this Canadian National Research Organization. And what they had was they set up a full-size room, maybe half the size of this room, and they flooded part of it, and the other part of it was a frame building with openings. And then they took various types of flood barriers and put them in those openings, and then even subjected it to wave action, and then basically instrumented it and measured the leakage, et cetera, et cetera. This worked out extremely well against water 2 or almost 3 feet high. And the only drawback, as I mentioned earlier, was the fact that if the water is higher than that, it could potentially, or would, overtop it. So that's the extent of it, but again, a lot of smart people in Naples are looking at it, and we have confidence in it, Chuck.
Jay, go ahead.
Great, Mick, thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. Has the committee given any thought to the fact that we have folding chair and overflow Sundays?
So the first concern, so I guess what you're asking is the committee given any thought to increasing the size of the church? That's what I'm reading into your question, is that right? So the answer is no, for the most part, because there is some limitation on the size of the church, and although the church does have overflow Sundays like that, they aren't all the time. And part of the appeal of the church is its intimate size. So no, we haven't, our primary concern was to make the church the same. And I know from experience in other congregations that while there is something to be said for building a larger church, sometimes you build a larger church and it feels empty afterwards. And that is not a good feeling in a church. So I'm not discounting what you're saying, and everything is, everything has been at least, well, I shouldn't say everything. We've talked about a lot of different things, and the idea, I'll give you an example from my own restaurant. When Ian destroyed our restaurant, we thought we should build it bigger. We should change this, we should change that. And where we ended up coming down to was, no, let's put it right back the way it was before, because it worked very, very well the way it was before. So yes, should we plan for the future? Yes. I mean, we have received some suggestions about moving the church to the other side of the street, making it much larger, moving off campus, selling the property. I mean, and there is no suggestion that's a suggestion that is not considered. However, I think the thinking right now is more in line with the church that we have over there is beautiful. It works very well. There are times when it's at capacity and overflowing, and maybe that's not a bad thing, because people can overflow into this parish hall, which was designed to do that. Because, but I appreciate you raising it, because anytime you're going to be potentially building something new, you should think about what you can do better, right? Which would be, should we build it larger? But I think the current idea is no, except in maybe tiny little ways that just make sense if the code's changed and you have to have a passageway a little bit bigger. But does that answer your question? Okay. Does anybody else have anything? No, I don't think so. All right, well, again, thank you all for coming. This is still a process, so
I want to thank you all. I don't often stand at the chancel step and look at you in the eye and say, read this. I did that. It's a very important moment in the life of our parish family. I think a lot of wonderful, faithful minds have been at work on the challenges, on the solutions. I remind you all that everybody will have an emotional response to this as well. Some are very thoughtful emotional responses. Some are very thoughtful, but may come out as zingers, and that's okay. You can zing me. But I will say, next week is Mother's Day, and then the vestry is going to meet the following Sunday for their preliminary discussion. But I'll be sitting in the family room, ready for a cup of coffee. I know some of you get nervous coming into the fancy rector's office for a cup of coffee. It shouldn't be, but come and see me in the family room. Come as a group. Come get me. Please stand. Let us pray. We give thanks for this time to come together as a parish family to tackle challenges that we wish we didn't have, but to do so with grace, with love, with thoughtfulness and prudence, knowing that the decisions we make will echo down to the generations that follow. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Peace be with you.